Hello, 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 and how I hope everybody's well. And if you missed me Sunday, yes, I did get the haircut. It had to get done, right? Okay, moving right along. I want to take what I said last time on neurons and take it a little bit further and explain to you how the neurons get connected to memories and habits and generally control your behavior to a great degree. Well, to a large degree, actually. So let me just talk about, we'll just look at this briefly. It's not, oops, let's see if I can put this here. We're going to talk about three neurons. Neuron, the one on the top, two on the bottom. These two, all you need to know is that roughly they're sort of like connected. And these little things over here that I've got, oops, wrong side. I'm looking at backwards, are the dendrites. Think in terms that this bottom neuron number two, is, shall we say, close to and running into and connecting with or meeting or saying hi to, however you want to think about it, neuron number one. Okay. So let's take a live scenario or something that could happen to some of you. Let's say that you're going from work to home. Well, let me back up. Let's say for this total example that you and your partner have two vehicles, one of which is an automatic and one of which is a standard. You tend to drive the automatic. Okay. Generally, you're going to leave home and then you've got certain things to do. Maybe you've got to go pick up the kids. Maybe you just then go do some other little chore, have to drop something off, maybe pick up the dog, whatever. Maybe go to the store and pick up something for dinner. And then you go on home. You've got a specific set of routines that you go into that you do on a relatively regular basis. So what happens is your neuron number one is set up that you're leaving work and you're going home and you're doing all of those things. But those things, picking up the children, going to the grocery store, whatever, are essentially neuron number two. And so they're getting connected, if you will, in your particular habits because you tend to do them on a regular basis. Okay? So that over the course of time, if you do that, say like 3 or 4 or even 5 days out of the week, pretty soon it's going to get to be a habit. That once you leave the office, you're going to go through and do all of those things or leave work wherever it happens to be, whether it's McDonald's or an office. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But you do all of those things on such a regular basis that you almost do them without even thinking about it. If you've ever left the office and pulled into the driveway at your house or your apartment and said, I don't remember doing this. Did I run a red light? Did I kill somebody? You don't remember because it just happened together because the neurons were intertwined because the two behaviors or all of those behaviors, there are more than two actually, were so connected. Okay. Now, let's suppose, go back to what I said before, that you, for some, about two vehicles, let's suppose for the sake of argument that for some reason you can't drive the automatic, you've got to use the other car, which is a standard. You're not going to go through the same issue because you've got to stop to think about what you're doing with the standard. You may be able to drive it, but because the motions and the details are different, you may even think about perhaps maybe a slightly different way from work to home because maybe you don't want to go uphill because it's hard for you with the standard or whatever. So you've developed a very different set of habits. Does this make sense? You follow me so far? So that when you're doing two things, is one of the phrases that they say is neurons that wire together or fire together, wire together. In other words, when the two neurons are coming together and they're doing pretty much the same things at the same time, like you get from the office and then you go pick up your children and then you go to the grocery store for dinner, and then you go home, they're wiring together so that, or they're firing together rather, so that later on they'll fire together and you do this by habit. Okay. With a standard shift, you're actually going to have to think about what you're doing. What do I do next? What comes next? Because it's thrown off your particular pattern, and those two neurons, your neuron number one and neuron number three, don't wire together. I keep saying, I'm sorry about that. Don't fire together. So they don't wire together. So you don't create that same routine. Okay. Now let's take this one step further. Suppose you move. Everything else stays the same. You normally drive the automatic, you still pick up the children, etc. So what will happen is you'll leave work, you'll go pick up the children, you'll go pick up something to eat, you'll pick up whatever, the dog or whatever you do after work on your way home. Because the neurons fire together, what's going to happen is the first few days after you move, you're going to end up in the driveway of the old place because you followed those neurons and they will just fire together so much that you will do what you did before because you're not thinking about it, because you've developed that habit. You actually have to go back and think about what you're doing to develop a new habit to drive to the new place. Because in this particular case, for example, picking up the kids is probably going to stay the same, but you might go someplace else to pick up something for dinner. Or you might have to change some of your routine because you've got different locations. So if this was work and this used to be home and now home's over here, you're going to have to create some new routines and you're going to have to think about those things. Okay? So that it's going to take a while for you to get into the new habit of going from work over here to up here instead of going from work over to here. Now, if you're in a standard shift car, it's going to be a lot easier because you haven't developed those same routines. Does this make sense? It might even start you to thinking about why you do certain things, because some of the things you do, your habits are going to be done because your neurons have wired together so much, I'm sorry, I apologize. Your neurons are firing together. They're both acting in the same time. Maybe I should make, fire. They're just sort of burning up. They're firing together. So they wire together and they get like in a pair so that they get together. Okay. Does this make sense? Now, when it comes to say something like studying, let's think about this. Suppose you're going to take a test and maybe you're using flashcards. If you've ever done this and you're going through your flashcards and you take one card, you look at that, you stick it on the bottom, and you go through it again and again and again. What's going to happen is you're going to learn that material in the sequence that's in those flashcards. If those flashcards drop and you pick them up again and start all over again, you're going to be surprised at how much you do not know. Because what you've done is, again, the neurons for each card have fired in sequence. And so you've learned it in sequence. If you really want to learn the material on the flashcards, you go through them and then shuffle them. You never go through them in the same sequence twice, because you've got to learn them in a random way for you to really understand that particular material. Because if all you do is go from 1 to 10 back and forth all at the same time, you're going to learn it in that sequence. If something gets out of sequence, you're going to be lost. So that sometimes if you've got something and you can't remember it, and the circumstance has changed because you don't have all those little cues together that give you the answer to the question of whatever it is you're looking for. So when people have told you, most likely, just as they told me, that you need to study in the same place, in a nice quiet place, this is really not true. And people have discovered that this doesn't work anymore, because what happens is, let's say you find a nice quiet place in a closet or something like that, and you study there, and you go and you have to take a test in, say, a room that's going to have some degree of noise. You're going to have a hard time doing this because you're going to be in a different circumstance. If you're absolutely positive, no doubt whatsoever, it's not going to change whatsoever, that you're going to take a particular test in a given room, if you can, study for the test in that room. So that when you're looking at things and you're looking around at the room and you're, okay, what's the capital of Maine or whatever, and you're looking at the room, you're going to, in a sense, fire the neurons together so that they will wire together, so that when you take the test, you're more likely to have that information come back to you. The problem is, if for some reason the roof leaks and you've got to go take the test in another room, you may not do so well, because they've changed the circumstances and you don't have the cues in the room around you that's going to pull back some of those memories. So that if you're going to study someplace, you're better off actually trying to study in different locations, and to some degree with some places with a little bit of noise. I wouldn't say, Grand Central Station, but again, if that's what you got, that's what you've got. And do different things, because the more varied you put your circumstances, the more likely you are to learn that material, regardless of the circumstance you're in. Because if you just do it in one circumstance, you're going to know it pretty much in that one circumstance. So that if you've ever been in a situation and it's like something comes back to you and it's like, oh, I've got this down, and I'm, 15 minutes later, it's like, I just had it. Where did it go? It's because you changed the circumstance. You changed the cues. The environment around you is different. Because what you're essentially doing is, when you do it in the same place, you're having neurons 1 and 2 fire together, so they wire together. So if we could think in terms of the dendrites getting connected in here, they're sort of mating up with each other, if you will. Now, granted, this is oversimplistic, but hopefully that gives you an idea. And then when you're down here with neuron number 3, this is different. It's not part of this group. And so it's going to make it easier or more difficult, depending on which way you're looking at it, to learn that particular material. So that when you're looking at your neurons, what you're trying to do is, well, I guess it depends on what you're looking at trying to do. If you're trying to learn something really, really well, so that you keep it forever, let's just say the capitals of the 50 states, that you want to be able to know it for the rest of your life, you're better off studying in different areas under different circumstances, because that's going to mimic more of the circumstances that you're going to find in the future. If you just do it in one place, say like at the dining room table, and that's the only place you study, you're going to be limited, because about the only place you'll remember the 50 capitals is going to be at the dining room table. Now, again, there's a lot of rough edges around this, but hopefully you get the basic idea of what I'm trying to say. So that if maybe this explains why sometimes it's like you know that you know something and you can't pull it up until you say, like, do something. This is why you walk into one room and you can't remember why you walked into it. You've got to go back to the other room to take a look at the cues, because when you walk into that second room, you don't have the cues there. You got to walk back to the first room to see the cues so you can remember why you walked in the second room. Does that make sense? Okay, I hope this was useful. I hope this was helpful, and we will probably talk more about the neurons and memory and habits in the future. So again, share this or let me know what you think. And if you've got any questions, hit reply and tell me, or ask me, I guess. So we will talk to you later. So have a good week. Bye, everybody.